attending virtually, Mr. Panoranda and Mr. Hoffman, and 5 cases on the agenda. The first case is RPC 35005034 at 1401 South Joy Street. Ms. Ross, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Okay. This property is 1401 Joyce on Pentagon Row. It was built in 2003. There are 326 rooms. We wanted to thank Jonathan for revising the value to 147 million on appeal. However, we still think there's some movement there. If you turn to page 32, you'll see a side-by-side analysis, and all our assumptions are based on the calendar year end 2024 income and expense or the performance of the property. The gross potential income is 10,624,700. We have parking at 325,000 and miscellaneous at 518,000. We use the county guidelines for vacancy and collection loss of 5%, and the expenses are at 2,899,176. Although the county did increase their cap rates year over year, market evidence suggests that a higher rate is applicable. We increased the cap rate by 20 basis points to 5.89%, and our value became what our revised value is 135,744,300. If you do not make that cap rate change, the assumed value is 140 million. And that's what I have. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Burns for the county, please.
Yes, good morning, board. Good morning, Ms. Ross. Today we will be focusing on primarily on the summary sheet, which is on page 4 of the BOE packet. We reviewed the most recent income and expense surveys submitted by the appellant. If you look at columns B1, C1, and E, you can see the apartment rents, gross potential income, and net operating income have shown continuous year-over-year growth for the past 3 years. Also, on the operating expense percentage for each of the past 3 years has been between 25.3 and 27.3. Also, if you look at the appellant's pro forma for the EGI has $10,894,516 and an NOI of $7,995,340, which is a decline of 2.4% from year over year from 2024. It is difficult to determine that the property would see a decline in performance during 2025, considering that both the EGI and NOI has grown every year for the past 3 years, and there has been no indicators this growth trend will change in 2025. The cap rate is supported by information from submitted income and expense surveys and commercial real estate publications such as PricewaterhouseCoopers and RERC. The fourth quarter information from these publications was not available during the 2025 analysis period. Also, in our revision column F, DREA projected an increase of 1.9% in rents from the original projection based on the prior year's rent information provided by the appellant. We also increased the operating expense ratio from 24.2% to 25.9% based on the prior year's operating expense information. After revision, the indicated total decreased from $148,827,000 to $147,887,000, and we asked that the board set the 2025 assessed value at $147,887,000. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? No? Okay. Mr. Burns, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Yes, I just want to reiterate that it's hard to believe that there will be no growth in the income at the property, considering the market conditions and the continuous year-over-year growth for at least the past 3 years. And we just ask that the board accept our recommendation of $147,887,000. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ross, if you take a minute to wrap up this.
Yes, I'd like to direct your attention to page 4 again, or the county's summary page. The 2022 apartment gross potential was 9.8. In 2023, it was 10.1. In 2024, it was 10.8. And the revised is at 11.1. Not quite sure why the county increased the gross potential income when they made the revision, but that's one item that I wanted to mention. The other one is if we're not considering a fourth quarter market cap rates, if you go to third quarter 2024, those rates are very similar. RERC is 5 to 7% with an average of 5.9. PwC national rate is 4 to 7.5% with an average of 5.3. 8 and Mid-Atlantic apartment rates are 5.65%, 5 to 6.5% with an average of 5.71.
Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
It's just among the board. Go ahead, Mr. Yates.
Well, I find it hard to believe that they're freezing their rents and the increase is just not happening. It's a steady 500,000 a year increase. Expenses are up for what the county's projected. I see very reasonable projections by the county.
Yeah, the only thing I would say on this, when you look on page 4, when you look even at the reconstructed, so starting in column A, we got 7 million, then we got 7.3, reconstructed again at 7.8. I think the 8.4 is pretty aggressive. You know, I think the 8.1 is probably more in line.
Well, when I look at 24, 8.1, almost 8.2, you know, there's a steady amount of increase running.
There is, but it's coming from 7.8, call it 7.9 to go to 8.1 as opposed to 8. I think the 8.4 is too high for me. I don't know, Mr. Hoffman.
Mary, I'm kind of thinking the same thing. It's not way off, but it's a little bit off. What I looked at was, it looks like the revision from the county to the operating year 24. They basically assumed 2.4% revenue growth, which is probably fair. But then the expense growth was only 1.4%, which seems like a lot lower than trend for kind of every expense category. So what I did was I just increased the expenses to reflect the 3% year over year growth. And then I ended up with a slightly lower NOI of 8,372,239, and it comes out to at the cap rate, it comes out to 147,062,000. So it's a slight reduction, about 800,000.
Mr. Mendez.
Yeah, I did something similar, Greg. The only thing I did is I took the expenses from column F and put them in column D. The NOI came out to 8.2. So my final number was 145,546. So million. So that's what I did.
I can agree that I thought the expenses were slightly low, but the revenue was a steady increase. You've got the 5% vacancy, which is not being hit. I thought that offset the minor difference in expenses. I'm good with the county.
All right, Mr. Penaranda.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought I was on the same line as Mr. Hoffman, thinking that maybe the expenses were a little bit off. I didn't really do the numbers, but, you know, I know it's a slight reduction, but I think I would be okay with that. I also took the NOI from the actual operating for 2024, and I just capped that at the current rate. I know we always hear about the cap rates that are, you know, the average is this for Mid-Atlantic or the region. But, you know, Arlington is always being a little bit off from other counties around it. So I'm okay with the cap rate. And capping that actual operating comes to about 143,925, 400.
Right, that's what I did. Too low, okay.
I thought that NOI was a little bit more in line, I guess, with the actual increase year after year.
All right. Where are you? I know where you are. I don't want it to revert.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was the lowest one, so I'd go for a reduction. My number was 145 million.
Yeah, we're 143.
Oh, wow. Okay, never mind.
That's what I'm saying. Okay, Greg, where are you?
Yeah, I'm okay with Jose and Jose's number.
Okay, all right, Mr. Penronda?
Sure, I'll go ahead and make a motion to reduce the assessment to 143,925,400 based on using the actual operating numbers from 2024 and capping at the current cap rate.
Okay, I'll second it. All in favor? Aye, opposed? Okay, it's 4-1 without Mr. Yates. The assessment's reduced to 143,925,400.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next case is RPC 340202232 at 1801 Crystal Drive. Ms. Ross, you can start with your 8 minutes on this property.
Okay, this property is Crystal Place. It was built in 1988. If you turn to page 34, you could see our side-by-side analysis again. We are considering the calendar year 2024 INE statement in our analysis. There's the gross potential income's $5.9 million. Vacancy and collection loss was a little higher. The actual vacancy and collection loss was 9.44 or 260,000. Expenses at 2,366,558. I'm not even going to mention the cap rate since we've already nixed that, but we do believe that the cap rate should be increased. However, if there's no cap rate change, the value would be at a 61,906,145. I did want to direct your attention to page 35. We did include a 3-year income and expense. I know the county revises their income and expense, and I'm not quite sure what they're taking out and what they're not. So I just wanted to mention that we also included a 3-year side analysis. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Burns for the county, please.
Yes. Yeah, again, we'll be focusing on the summary page on page 4. We reviewed the most recent income and expense survey submitted by the appellant. If you can look at columns B1, C1, and E, you can see the apartment rents, gross potential income, effective gross income, and net operating income have all shown continuous year-over-year growth for at least the past 3 years. And during the past 3 operating years, the INEs have shown vacancy and collection loss has remained steady between 3.5 and 4.1%. And according to the rent roll and the actuals provided in the 2024 INE, the occupancy rate was reported to be 96.5%. So I'm not sure where the higher vacancy rate came from. So there's no reason to assume the property will require anything other than a standard 5% vacancy and collections allowance. Also in the appellant's pro forma, the NOI of $3,586,223 shows a 9.8% decrease from the 2024 actuals. It's really difficult to determine that the property would see this steep of a decline in performance during 2025, considering the NOI at the property has grown each of the past 3 years, and there has been no indication that the NOI growth trend will change in 2025. Again, same cap rate argument. Again, in revision column F, we reported projected there will be a 5% increase in rents based on prior year's rent information provided by the appellant. We also increased the operating expense ratio from 35.2% to 36.3% based on the prior year's operating expense information provided by the appellant. And after the revision, there was a decrease from $72,913,500 to $72,590,400. And we recommend that the assessed value be set at $72,590,400. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? No? Okay, Mr. Burns, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate that we did look at all of their information, revised our numbers based on the prior 3 years information that we received from the appellant. The property has consistently shown growth for at least the past 3 years, and there's no reason to see that the property will all of a sudden start to decline in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ross, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Sure. I just wanted to mention that the calendar year in 2024 NOI is 3.9 and the county is using 4.2. I also wanted to direct you guys to page 5, which is the apartment revives worksheet with the 1 bedrooms at 2,240 and 2 bedrooms at 3,158. But then if you turn to page 9, there's an average of the rents, which are for 1 bedroom, 2,155, and for 2 bedrooms, 3,017, which is something that I noticed. I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, it's just among the board. Great.
I thought the expenses were low. Tried to compare across the line every year and every item almost, but I ended up increasing the expenses to 38%. And I can go through the numbers, but it came out to $4,092,935. $70,653,115.
Other folks? Mr. Hoffman?
Yeah, I mean, just the NOI trend year over year, it's as Jonathan said, it's like consistent, but I think the jump is a little too high from 24 actuals to 25. I don't think it ever went up, over 200,000 in 1 year. So I'm kind of with Mark that a little bit of a reduction makes sense.
And I'm sorry, what was your NOI, Mark?
Its NOI was $4,092,935.
And that was increase in expenses to
38%.
Yeah, I would agree. I was looking at the GPI the whole time and I thought that was a little bit high, so I'd be in favor of reduction as well. I vote for your number, Mark. Sounds good.
Okay, Mr. Panorama, anything different?
No, I think, yeah, I would be okay with that. I mean, it's keeping pretty much the value as it was from last year. I'm a little bit more hesitant on this one because I think the income has been increasing at least between $100,000 to $200,000, year after year. So, I'll be okay with that.
Okay, all right. Mr. Yates?
I'll make a motion to reduce it to $4,092,000.
That's your NOI.
Oh, NOI. Sorry, that's the form NOI to 4 million. The reducing assessment to $70,653,115. 100.
Could I second that? But Mark, can you make it 100 even?
Yes.
I
Okay.
just- Okay, so we have a motion, a second by Mr. Hoffman, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, it is unanimous. The assessment's reduced to $70,653,100 even.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
To increase expenses to 38%. Okay, next up, we have Mr. Chikas and Mr. Yanoni. Yeah, okay. Third case on the agenda is RPC 34027-562 at 2800 Potomac Avenue. Mr. Yanoni, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. Subject property is the Renaissance Arlington Capitol View Hotel. It is a 300-room full-service hotel built in 2011. I'm going to start on our income approach page within the BOE memo, which is page 32 of 89, and quickly run through how we got to our requested assessment of $68.9 million. The first adjustment we made was to reflect the room revenue of 2024, which was about 15.1 million. We projected an increase to 15.3. We then used the actual 2024 other income figures and adjusted the operating expense ratio before reserves from 68.5, which is the county's rate, to 70, which is the rate we observed based on the income and expense statement submitted. We deducted the 4.5% reserves and capitalized it at an 8.5% base cap rate, which we believe to be the appropriate cap rate compared to the county's 6.842%, which I'll get more into later. That's how we deduct personal property below the line. That's how we get to that $68.9 million. It's worth noting, and we do appreciate the county taking a second look. The current revision represents an 8% increase from the previous year, although NOI has only grown between 3 and 4% from year to year, depending on what figures you look at. You might notice that our 2024 constructed column of actual income and expense indicates a net operating income of 6.7 million, while the county is coming in a bit higher around, if you look at their test sheet, and the difference based on that is for two reasons. The first reason is that it appears the county has excluded the rent expense from the operating expenses, and we believe that that expense should be included. If you look at page, sorry, just a second, page 84 of 89, you could see the internal income statement submitted by the owner in conjunction with the annual survey. And there is a rent expense of $25,540. This is not a ground rent or something that should be included in a fee simple. This is equipment rent that's necessary for operations to maintain the income level at the property. For example, maybe washer and dryer machines to, for the laundry, etc. So we believe that that should be included. Additionally, backing out the county's number, it appears that they added back that $1 million, 25,282 to the NOI, as, real property tax should be excluded. However, I think this may have been a slight oversight, as this income statement does not specify that this is just property tax. This includes other types of non-income tax, including but not limited to personal property taxes, which are an operating expense. So if you look at the assessment notice that was submitted on page 82 of 89, you can see the 2024 tax amount of about $957,000 based on the 1.201 rate. That is the real property tax amount, and that can be verified on the county website. I think it came out with the water and sewer or stormwater fee to like $958,000. So I believe that the county adding back this figure while not reviewing the actual, real property tax bill resulted in the exclusion of operating expenses that must be considered. And the total amount that the overestimation in the reconstructed county column is about $92,621. And above and beyond that, additional expenses we did not include, as well as the county, is below the line. This owner does consistently report non-recurring and other expense distribution charges that are very significant. We were not able to get full line item detail on this, but I was able to confirm that it does include operating expenses from other accounting periods, including something like damage claims not covered by insurance. So, while we're not including those expenses, I would like to point that out, as I believe that we're also being conservative and arguably underestimating what the annual expenses at this property would be if we were to have more detail on that. But since we were not able to get that detail, we have excluded it in an effort to be reasonable. So with that in mind, we believe that if we go to the county's projection page, the revision is currently projecting a NOI of 7 million, which we believe is much higher than the roughly 6.7 million, which, our NOI, I believe is much more in line with actuals and even projects a modest increase, which we think is a better way to account for the performance at the property. In addition to this, cap rate is a big issue on this one. If you turn to page, and I apologize for jumping around so much, page 34 of 89, you'll see that we've included a chart here that compares the county's hotel cap rates for full service compared to the PwC surveys. You'll see that the county has, since 2022, consistently drifted very far away from the averages. In tax year 22, they were exactly at the PwC average of 7.35%. And they have consistently lowered their cap rates from then to now, while PwC has had, a dramatic expansion in cap rates, which is expected with the interest rate situation we're seeing in the market. So in 2025, the county has now drifted to 6.84% base cap compared to the 8.5% PwC average for fourth quarter. We've also included the third quarter and the page above on page 33 of 89. So we really appreciate the county's consideration of that. And I understand if, the cap rate's not going to be adjusted, I think that it's all the more reason to be conservative on the net operating income, because if you're, being aggressive on both inputs, it's going to push the value a little bit out of whack. We've also included 3 sales from 2024 with reported cap rates. None of them were within Arlington County, and none of them were necessarily comparable sales to the subject. However, all 3 of those sales were 8.5, 8.4, and 8.8% cap rates per CoStar. And I think that's a further indication that the county is simply, it appears that they're lowering their cap rates each year without much support. And unlike office cap rates, where they provide the Corpaz survey, the Corpaz cap rate study that has a very detailed analysis and conclusion on the cap rates, there is not much transparency from the county on where their cap rates are coming from for hotels and how they're being derived or calculated. The 6.84% is a very specific number. So I would think there would be some type of math behind that, but I don't believe we've had any clarity on that. So with that in mind, we'd appreciate your consideration to the roughly 6.7 million actual NOI if you account for the actual real property tax expense and the equipment rental expense, which is an annual reoccurring operating expense. It's still, I think if you use the county's cap rate, it would still come in, as it's very similar to last year's value, which I think would make sense given the fact that cap rates are expanding so rapidly in the market, and the NOI growth year over year was really only 3 to 4%. So that's all I have, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Perfect timing. Mr. Chicas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. So relying primarily upon page 3, the summary sheets, we can see again, just like the other hotels in the county, this property has had a return to normalcy of the historically achieved levels of 2019. Growth of revenue per available room, growth of occupancy, growth of rental room revenue, growth almost 11% for food and beverage revenue, which again is highly indicative of group and return to normalcy with group travel, business travel. Over 12% growth for miscellaneous. So again, echoing all those miscellaneous goods, services related to anything other than food and beverage and room, up over 12% growth. Total revenue up almost 5% year over year. You can see in the revision that's made, our projection for room revenue is actually less than half of what was achieved last year, 2.5%. Again, a fairly conservative viewpoint, considering growth of 171% 2022, 21% 2023, and again 5% 2024. Projections for OPEX are higher than the appellant owners, again calling for some 2.4% growth. And again, fairly modest 2.8% NOI growth, less than approximately 0.5% less than what was achieved last year at 3.3%, as you can see in column E. This again is also accounting for 4.5% FF&E reserves that are not displayed or reported on the financial statements that get turned in. As you heard testimony from the appellant's agent, we get financial statements in lieu of the county's I&Es. This is to our detriment in that we then get accused of missing financial statements or line items that we should understand, even though we've asked for these forms to be filled out year and again. I believe there's been made mention that the agents have asked the owners to fill out our I&E forms so that they are of equal readability, if you will, with other hotel properties. We can't be held to account of not knowing how to read their internal documents. And it should be noted too that the agent and I actually spoke about this particular property, and he requested 6 additional days with which to confirm these other charges that he mentioned. And in that 6 days was not able to confirm that in writing or get us any sort of documentation that these actually charges were included erroneously. Given the extra time that was given to the owner to clarify these goods, given the lack of usage of the I&E questionnaire forms, given the support that we've shown time and again as far as our cap rate support, I believe there's made mention of the PwC third quarter national survey. Full service shows ranges of 6% to 10.5% for full service hotels, as this one is. Again, this hotel is well within range of that property. The income stream supports the increase year over year. And again, I think as was made mention, this is a fairly modest increase year over year from last year's assessment of 8% increase. That's in stark contrast to the owner's request of a negative 14% year over year assessment change. We do believe that the revision should be confirmed at 86,241,300. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Yates.
To the appellant, you, part of the discussion that you brought up was the expenses. The expense issues weren't reflected properly. And I was wondering, is that a new item for this year, or is that the way they've been reported historically? Or not?
Is this about the below the line expenses or about the real estate tax?
Yes.
The below the line expenses, they've always reported that same way, and
so what we have on the historic also reflects the same issue that you're discussing for this year.
Yeah, and just to summarize, essentially, we both, us as the appellant and the county, have ignored those pretty large expense items. They're not in either of our summaries or accounted for in our analysis whatsoever.
County, you have something to?
But just we would disagree with the wording. We don't believe we've ignored it. Again,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we've been receiving income statements for 4 years. We've asked them to fill out I&E questionnaires, which go over line by line, what's allowable, what's not allowable, and they've returned in their income statements.
No, Mr. Jenkins, if you take a minute to wrap up then.
Yes, ma'am. So again, relying primarily on the income stream. When we look at this property, again, it's seen growth year over year over year, and return to 2019's normalcy. When you're looking at column E, you see NOI growth of 3.3%. If you look at column F, our revision calls for approximately 0.5% less than that, 2.8%. We do believe that's well within range of reasonability. And as far as stabilization, we believe we're all over it. We have cap rate support well within ranges of our national full service hotels. We do believe the revision should be confirmed at 86,241,300. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Iannone, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Thank you. So I'd like to note that independent of the below the line expenses we discussed previously, the county is removing the rent expense of $25,540 and adding back the taxes of $1,025,000, despite the fact that the real estate taxes were only $960,000 roughly. This results in column E overestimating the 2024 NOI by $92,621. And I understand the county's comment about this being an internal statement. However, I think if there was one factor the county should be able to verify is what they paid in real estate taxes in 2024. And if you note that discrepancy and understand that hotels don't only pay real estate tax as an operating expense, it would be very easy to understand that the difference is other types of tax, including personal property tax, that need to be accounted for. So with that in mind, I think that the reconstructed column E, it does overstate the NOI. However, I think that number would be a more reasonable projection than the projection being applied to the county, which then grows that overstated NOI from there. And I would like to, place more emphasis on the expanding cap rates in the market, which do have downward pressure on valuations of hotels, while county continues to decrease. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, it's just board. Mr. Mendez.
Yeah, I will say, although it's up 8% year over year, that's under the average for hotels. But it is hard to give the appellant the benefit of the doubt when they're not properly submitting the I&E. With that said, I did try to run a couple of tests. I tried the total revenue in column G, and I used the expenses from column E, and it still came out higher than the county's revision. So I'm okay with the revision.
Any other folks? Mr. Hoffman?
I mean, the only thing the appellant brought up that is also kind of confusing to me is the cap rate methodology for full service hotels. It just seems odd that full service went down, limited service went up. And then I'm diving into the actual briefing that we got with the commercial guidebook, and it's like the source of the cap rate is PwC third quarter range of 6 to 10.5 with an average of 8.65. And then third quarter national luxury upper scale overall cap rate range 6 to 10 with an average of 8.25, which is closer to last year. So how do we end up at 8.043 when that's above, better than average from these surveys? I don't, it is a jump and I don't really understand it. So I kind of feel like last year's cap rate probably makes more sense.
Okay. Other folks? Mr. Penaranda? Is your microphone on, sir?
I'm so sorry. Yes, I did the same as Mr. Mendez. I ran a couple of tests using actuals and changing some of the expenses, but I'm okay with the revised. I think it's proper. And, again, talking about cap rates, a lot of the surveys that we talk about are including, regional or national averages. So I'm not convinced of making any changes to the cap rate at this time.
Mr. Yates?
I'm good with it.
All right. I believe we've got enough folks. So you want to do it?
Sure. I'm going to move that we confirm the county's 2025 revised number at 86,241,300.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that. Let me just make sure that we're correct. This will be a reduction. I know the county is proposing a reduction, so we will be reducing that. We wouldn't be confirming.
Okay, a motion and a second by Mr. Penaranda. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, it's 4-1 without Mr. Hoffman. The county's revised number of 86,241,300 has been confirmed. Thank you. Next up is RPC 34027563 at 2850 Potomac Avenue. Mr. Iannone, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next subject property is Residence Inn Arlington Capitol View. It's a 325 room residence suites hotel built in 2011. I'm going to be starting on our page, or I guess the BOE memo, page 86 of 142, to quickly run through how we get to our requested assessment. To be totally transparent, this is mostly a cap rate case, but I will quickly run through how we get to our requested amount. So in our second column, the Ryan column, we adjust the rooms revenue upward from the 2024 actual amount based on a 72% occupancy and 140 ADR, slightly higher than the county's figure. We apply the actual year-end 2024 other income figures, and we adjust the operating expenses to 59% before reserves. The actual 2024 operating expenses were about 57.6%. However, given the inflationary pressures on hotel operating expenses, we thought it might be reasonable to project a slight increase to 59%. One other change we made that we noticed is on this type of hotel, the county has historically allowed a 5% reserve figure. For tax year 25, they've adjusted that figure to a very specific 4.4%. We felt that, looking at the analysis, there was really no tangible change to the property or the market that would warrant such a change. And I think the 5% is in alignment with the market on these residence suites type of hotels. So we have maintained that 5% from previous years. The most important adjustment we make, and we ultimately do project a slight decrease to the NOI, really basically just kind of reconstructing and getting back to the county's NOI with what we believe to be supported inputs. But the biggest issue we wanted to bring to the board is the cap rate on this property. I know Mr. Hoffman mentioned that this is one category of hotel where the cap rates did increase. However, we feel that it's still not reflective of market surveys. So on the following page, I've included our cap rate support, which includes RERC and PwC survey summarized, which the supporting pages are in the back if you would like to review the source documents. But as you could see, the national select service lodging market in Q3 2024 was an average of 9%, and in Q4 was 8.94%. In Q3, it was also representing an increase from the previous Q3 2023. And if you look further back to, for example, Q3 2021, you'll see it was a much lower 7.9%. So overall, expanding cap rates in the market, it's really a function of interest rates. It seems to be that the county's rationalization of lowering the cap rates each year is that we're returning to normalcy after COVID. However, that's not the only consideration of how a cap rate is derived. And that is really demonstrated by the band of investment calculation. We've actually included an article that discusses this topic starts on page 14 of 58. So I think that's a very educational article that helps explain, even if the net operating income is going up, the cost of financing is a massive impact on how these hotel, transactions occur and what drives the purchase prices. So looking at, for example, a 2021 purchase price, even though we were in the middle of COVID, the more favorable financing terms did manifest as, higher purchase prices than what we might see today. I believe that this is further evidenced by the 3 sales we include that all have, cap rates in the mid to high 8% range. And then additionally, if we look at even the, RERC Washington, D.C. only, very local specific. I know it's not Arlington specifically, but D.C. is a very, it's right across the river. It's a very similar market, very similar demand drivers. Their first tier investment property rate is 8.3%, and that includes full service and luxury hotels. So I think that, for a residence suite style hotel like the subject property, the 9% base that we're applying is very reasonable. And essentially, the current assessment being proposed is a 14% increase from the previous year. And, that's just not what we're seeing in the market if we're looking at sales. And admittedly, one of the things that we were looking at is the Hilton Garden Inn courthouse that did sell for $195,000 a room, and we're coming in at $196,000, whereas the county's at $218,000 a room, $218,000. So we do feel that, this increase from the previous year's assessment of $190,000 a room does begin to deviate from the sales we're seeing in the market. And while NOI is increasing at the property and the county's NOI estimate was reasonable, ultimately the cap rate being below market and the resulting increase year over year kind of pushed this assessment out of line with the market. So. And I would like to point out, similar to the previous hotel, if you look at the county's test sheet, you will see higher NOI figures. And again, that is because rather than adding back the real estate tax only, they've added back all taxes reported on the income statement, which is not proper. It's, something I always check is the tax bills versus the tax amount on the income statement. So if you were to add back just the tax bill amount and not the overall tax amount, which includes other non-income taxes that are operating expenses, you will see that you'll come into alignment with our NOI. And the other difference is that rent expense that was also excluded. And then the fact that we are using that 5% reserve figure, which we don't believe should have been decreased this year. I believe all of these factors combined have contributed to what I believe to be an increase that is not supported by the market. Hotel, NOIs are going up, but cap rates are expanding. We're basically seeing values stagnate on properties like this, or, in some cases even go down if you look at some examples of recent, notable sales in the district. So with all that in mind, I'd appreciate the board's consideration to that increase over year and consider, an adjustment to any one of those inputs to help account for that. And similar to the last property, as much as I hate to say it, there are other expenses reported below the line here that I am working in future years to get more detail on. And I have a feeling once we get them to put pen to paper, that, in future years, we're going to see potentially amended I&E statements that report different, much higher expense items, because those are large expense categories that do include a good amount of operating expenses, but potentially some other corporate expense distributions and stuff that shouldn't be considered. So that's why we're playing it safe. We're not just throwing it in there. We're leaving it out. We're trying to stay as honest and true to what's been submitted as possible. And we do understand the frustration the county sees of not having the owner not fill out the I&E statement by hand like other owners. And that's something we are actively trying to get them on board with. It's certain companies are not always familiar with certain jurisdictions and how they work and are used to submitting internals. So sometimes we do face some resistance to that, but it is something we're working on. We acknowledge the flaw in that. And with that in mind, again, just that increase year over year, we'd appreciate the board's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Mr. Chicas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. So again, we'll start primarily upon page 3 of the summary sheet, which again, even more than the last property, shows strong rebound and performance. In fact, even besting the return to normalcy that it showed in 2023. Occupancy up 12%, almost 13% to 72%. That's extremely strong for a residence style suites hotel. Average daily rate was up almost 1%. Revenue per available room up almost 14%. Room revenues alone up 14%. Food and beverage up 14%. Miscellaneous up almost 50%. Total revenues up over 15%. Now, obviously, this was all unknown to us as we made our projections in column D. And you can see that we missed quite a number of the marks, almost $300,000 below the achievable total revenues. We over-projected operating expenses and under-projected the NOI by almost $300,000. Again, we did test the information with all of the metrics showing a year-over-year success. And again, much more modestly, if you look at column F, you'll see that we projected room revenues of 3.3%. That's a full 10% less than what was achieved last year. Food and beverage projection of 7%. Again, essentially half of what was achieved last year. 10% miscellaneous growth, a fourth of what was achieved last year. And again, a 4% overall growth, not even, again, a fifth of what was achieved last year. We heard a lot about cap rates, and just to inform the board members who may have missed my previous spiels, we want to make sure that not only is the surveys taken into consideration, it's again the success of Arlington's hotel portfolio. There was no stronger market in the state of Virginia for the last 2 years than Arlington County. And I apologize to keep repeating this, but I think it's of importance to know that we should be on the lower end of all these surveys. All of our hotels as a portfolio outperformed DC market, Fairfax, Loudoun, the airport, Dulles. There's no stronger market in the state of Virginia for 2 years running. We achieved that in 2019 as well. Obviously there was a dip during COVID, but there's always the belief that given the size, the number of hotels in the portfolio of Arlington, that there would be a return to normalcy, a return to success of the hospitality market. We've seen that the last 2 years, especially this past year. Proximity is strong. This across from the airport. Group travels back. National airports set passenger records for the last 2 years in a row. We've done what we can as far as testing this out income stream against the historics. There is mention of 3 sales of different styles of hospitality in different markets. As even the owner's agent mentioned, those really aren't comparables if they're not the same style and they're not in our market. In regards to the mention of the one sale that we did have in the county, please don't let that confuse you. Quite a bit smaller, 193 rooms. So obviously it's going to have a different per key value than this 325 rooms. And again, in regards to, the lack of adjustments made for taxes and things like that, this is the exact same situation that we had in our last case, where the owner was given an additional 6 days to clarify all of these remarks that were made during this hearing and previous, that we're not accounting for things below the line or taking too much taxes. In that 6 days, we heard nothing, no corrections to our methodology or to our summary sheet. Therefore, we do believe that not only is the test warranted, but it confirms column D at a value of $70,823,500. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? No? Okay. Any final comments, Mr. Chikas?
No, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Yanoni, if you take a minute to wrap up, if you have any comments?
Thank you. I'd just like to clarify that the 6-day comment, that was about the below the line expenses. At that time, we did not have the BOE summary sheet, and we're not able to clarify that those expenses were not being accounted for. We have since done that, and that was not part of that discussion. And again, like I mentioned, we're also not considering those below the line expenses. The ask was that the county might consider them if we were to get them the additional information, which we were not. And no harm, no foul. Neither of us are, accounting for those. And then I would like to point out that I agree Arlington has had success with the hotel market. That is reflected in the net operating incomes, and the cap rate is a much different factor, which I believe that article explains. And the biggest factor of that is the cost of financing, which has gone up dramatically. We believe that the increase year over year at this property is, higher than what we've been seeing on similar properties, and would appreciate consideration. And again, we can explain very clearly where our exact cap rate came from. I haven't heard the county yet explain where they got their exact number. Just the rationale that it should be, going down or improving based on Arlington's performance. Cap rates are very mathematical and should be able to be explained. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, it's just among the board. Where are folks on this? Mr. Mendez?
Yeah, I'll start. To the appellant's comment about the interest rate, I agree. It was a different market. The rates were lower, but the outlook on hotels was also different. And we sort of flip-flop now. So we have higher rates and much better outlook on the hotel market. So, and I also thought it was interesting that the property sold for $74 million in July of 2021, but the assessed value was $54 million. So it seems we've been catching up to that sale, and we're just under it. So with all that said, I mean, looking at the summary sheet, I don't see any errors, and I would confirm the county.
All right, Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, this is one where I think we probably are too high on a cap rate. Just to be careful, there's a big difference between a residence inn and another kind of extended stay, lower tier flag. So residence inns usually trade at a premium because it's a very sought after flag for owners. So I'm actually okay with the county's number as well. Just the way the appellant reports earnings in their package EBITDA, you'll see sales 12 to 14 times EBITDA. And that would be a much higher, like 80 million plus assessment for a residence inn. So I'm actually okay with where they're at.
Okay. Mr. Penaranda, did you have anything else to add?
No, actually, on this case, I was thinking that the test column was a better number, but I know we're not going to be increasing this, so I'm okay with the current assessment.
Okay. All right, Mr. Mendez?
Yep, I'm gonna move that we confirm the county's 2025 assessment at $70,823,500.
All right, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The county's assessment of $70,823,500 is correct. Thank you both. Do we have Mr. Warren? Okay, all right, the final case on the agenda is RPC 14036-233 at 801 North Monroe Street. Mr. Warren, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Okay, thank you all very much. I'll direct everyone to page 34 of 165 of the county's board memo. You'll find our summary of facts that was submitted along with our evidence package. This is the Virginia Square Plaza Apartments. It sits on one tax parcel or one tax ID account. It's currently assessed at $81,717,700. The county is recommending a revision to $76,381,100. And the value we're asking for from the board today is $66,720,200. This property was originally built in 1999, 225 total units. It's a Class B high-rise, 9 stories in the Ballston, Virginia Square submarket. Directing the board's attention now to the county's apartment income and expense summary page, which is on page 3. This is a pretty similar case to one that we presented just yesterday. And you'll see that it is and has been a stabilized property. There are 4 years, those columns A, B, C, and E reported for the last 4 years of reporting income and expense at the subject property. And similar to yesterday, you'll see that the county in this instance overestimated the gross potential income in their original income assessment analysis, as well as their revised column F. The county's gross potential income estimated of $7,382,200 in column D was $440,000 higher than the actual gross potential income reported on the year-end 2024 income and expense survey of $6.9 million. $6,942,024 in the county's revision column F. That decreased, I would say, marginally in comparison to what was actually reported in calendar year 2024 from $7,382,200 to $7,338,200. Again, similar to last year, this property and the historical actual reporting has shown that it has never gained in excess of 6.9 million, which is the year-end 2024 reporting and gross potential income in any of the last 4 reporting cycles from dating back to 2021. Now, again, it is a stabilized property. It has a vacancy that's below market and below the 5% that the county is adjusting for vacancy. And what appears that the county is then overestimating the gross potential income so that they can apply their 5% standard market vacancy rate that's applied to all high-rise apartment towers in the county. You can see the similar reporting and stabilized operations and operating costs over the last 4 years. This property reported expense costs of 36% in 2021, 33% in 2022, 36% in 2023, and most recently 38.4% in 2024. The county's initial model or income analysis estimated 33% for operating expenses, which is significantly below the 3 or 4 year average. And in their revised model, they did bump it up to now 37% of EGI, which, however, is still around $60,000 or $70,000 below the actual operating expenses reported in year-end 2024. With regard to the net operating income, this has been, again, a very stabilized property over the last 3 years. In 2022, the property reported an NOI of $4.15 million, $4.18 million in 2023, and then most recently $4.2 million in 2024. The county's initial assessment estimated NOI, which was significantly higher at $4.7 million. Their revised column F, test column, is essentially $4.4 million. They're still approximately $200,000 above what the property has ever been able to generate in terms of net operating income. The net operating income, just in comparison to the prior year, it increased marginally, less than 1% from the year prior. And as you see, the 2025 assessment reflected a 6.5% increase year over year from the 2024 assessment. Similar discussion to what we had last year with regards to the cap rate. Our pro forma or requested income analysis estimates a cap rate that's 20 basis points higher than the 5.75% cap rate that's being used by the county currently. If you turn to page 36 of 165, we've included a CoStar submarket report that includes the average submarket base cap rates for Arlington County, which is 5.4%. For the Ballston submarket specifically was 5.4%. The county's 5.75 fully loaded cap rate, when you take into consideration to deduct out 0.2% for replacement reserves and 1.033% for the estimated tax rate, is applying a base rate of 4.5% for this property, and there have been no sales to support that low of a base cap rate over the last several years. So with that, I'll conclude my time and wrap up, and happy to answer any questions that the board may have. I don't know. I know Sophie and Greg Rains, I saw a Ditmar number pop up. I don't know if there's anything additional you'd like to add with regard to this property.
Yeah, thank you, Blake, and good morning, everybody. This is Sophie with Ditmar Company. So one thing that I want to add is regarding to apartment income. One thing to note that is different compared to other operators in the area is Ditmar really believes in occupancy and full building. So therefore, we only give our residents very modest rent increases every year. So therefore, the GPI that indicated by the county, it just has never been achieved by Ditmar Company, given our model and strategy. And one other thing to mention is expenses are trending upwards. The building is aging and it is becoming more expensive to maintain. And in addition, that payroll is increasing as well. It is we are giving out higher wages to our staff member. So please take those into consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chikas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. So again, let's start with the summary sheet on page 3. Again, I'm hoping there's not a concerted effort to try to confuse the board members with the idea of focusing upon gross potential income and completely ignoring effective gross income. This was done last year. This was done yesterday. We've tried to make great strides in explaining that the NOI is actually formed off of the effective gross income line. Again, the accusations that we're padding the gross potential to levels never achieved before, when again, there's been no mention made of the $366,000, 5% of vacancy concessions that is being applied to this property that hasn't achieved those numbers for the last 3 years combined. So again, if we're using an artificially derived vacancy concession guideline of 5% that's not being achieved at this property, the gross potential income, the rents have to be adjusted upward to make a stabilized effective gross. If we're looking at just the effective gross, that's line 25, effective gross income, and looking from column A to column G, we see growth in B, column B, line 25, growth, EGI growth of 7.2% in 2022. Line C, 6% growth in 2023, column C rather. Column E, line 25, growth of EGI growth of 4.8% in 2024. Our revision calls for 1.9% growth, less than half of what was achieved in 2024, less than a third of what was achieved in 2023. If you look in column G, the problem with doing it the way the appellant would request is when you look in column G, they're calling for a negative 4% growth year over year. They believe this property is going to go down $244,000 after 4 years of continuous growth at the effective gross income line. That's taken into account the 1% vacancy that they've been enjoying the last 2 years. Not only have they had a 99% occupied building, their rents have gone up. Just apartment rents alone, 4.4% in 2022, 5.1% in 2023, 3.8% in 2024. Yes, again, we have to project a bit higher to get to a stabilized effective gross. There was mention yesterday that we don't do that on properties that have the obverse. In other words, they have higher occupancy. We do the exact same thing, but in reverse. Obviously, we have to squash potential rents to get to an effective, stabilized, effective gross. When you look at the revision, again, top to bottom, you can see that our effective gross is projection is 2%, less than 2%. So again, less than half of what was achieved last year. We do note too, and would ask the board to note that of the increase in expenses, some 240,000 of that were for building materials and for new gym equipment. That's not repair and maintenance of existing materials that is needed for the income stream. That's a replacement or improvement upon what was previously there. That being said, we don't believe that that should be considered a stabilized operating expense because there would be no expectation that you're replacing $45,000 or $35,000 of gym equipment every year or purchasing some $200,000 of building supplies every year. That one line item, the subtotal for building supplies, went up over 100% year over year. If they are choosing to every couple of years purchase a lot of building supplies and then keep those for a number of years, that's fine. That's an accounting method or management decision, but that wouldn't be an expectation that that would then continue every year in perpetuity. That being said, we did still offer quite a large projection for operating expenses based on years 21, 22, 23. Again, our overall projection for NOI is fairly modest given the last history of the years, especially in consideration of the appellant's belief that the NOI is going to go down almost 6% after 4 years of growth. Again, one of the true tests is looking at last year's assessment. When you look at last year's assessment, the county is actually calling for a negative year-over-year adjustment, just about 0.5% from last year. The appellant is asking for a negative 13% drop in value year over year. And that's after, again, EGI growth year over year over year, apartment growth year over year over year, NOI growth year over year over year. In regards to cap rates, again, we can keep covering this area. We only have access to the third quarters. We've shown that we're well within the reason of the ranges that are provided. We actually did point out to the board members during our commercial briefing that we actually do have some sales that are as low as 4% cap rates. Are they fully aligned and fully comparable to this one? Potentially not. But again, that's what we have to work with are the sales that occur in our county, supported by third-party surveys and from the institutional surveys. That being said, we do believe that our revision in column F should be supported and confirmed at a value of $76,381,100. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? No? Okay, any final comments, Mr. Chikas?
No, ma'am.
Okay, any final comments, Mr. Warren?
Yes. So again, going back, I know Chris had spoken that we're not mentioning EGI. Well, the EGI that's reflected in the county's revised income model in column F is still $130,000 higher than the actual effective gross income that was reported most recently in 2024. Our point with the gross potential income is that for, again, a property that is actually 5% vacant, what the county does is they would use their actual gross potential rent or gross potential income at 100% of market because it aligns with their 5% market vacancy rate that they apply in their mass market appraisal model to every single apartment. And all we're asking for is the same treatment and not to then artificially inflate the gross potential rent or gross potential income to then allow that 5% vacancy rate to be applied. They should not be punished for, again, keeping their rents in line in order to keep occupancy as high as possible. With regard to, again, the operating expenses, Sophie might be able to get into a little bit more of this, but as we've discussed, each year since
Each of the
COVID.
wrap up, because your minute is,
Contracting and vending costs, supply costs have increased year over year. Sophie, I don't know if there's anything you want to mention real briefly about that.
okay, thank you. It's just among the board now. Where is everybody? Mr. Yates?
I did run it and looking at the NOI to see how it's moved and what the projection is in column F. And I increased in expenses to 38.5%. And that brought the NOI down to 4,287,343, which I think is more in line with the historical increases in NOI annually. That brought the total price down, or the assessment down to 74,562,493. So that's what I just tried to make sure everything's moving as they're saying in the right portions. The county's doing the same thing. And I increased expenses.
Right, well, I did similar. I went to 38%. But my problem is it gets it down to 75,000. I don't think the property's gone down in value. It's a very stable building.
Yeah.
In previous years, it probably underassessed. So I'm struggling with that. I'm interested in, Mr. Hoffman's got his hand up there.
Yeah, I think Chris has done a good job every year, kind of looking at NOI year forward and where they're going to land. I think he's usually within, 0.5% of what the actual comes in. I think on this one, it was less than 0.5% off. On his projection last year, the appellant was 8% low. So we're kind of like, I'm inclined to kind of buy into Chris's model that there's going to be moderate growth and not a decline in NOI year over year. So I'm okay with the number, which is actually a reduction from last year.
Yeah.
But it's really close, so I'd be fine with it.
Yeah, I agree. Anything different, Mr. Penaranda?
No, I'm okay with it. And I looked at also the expenses that Mr. Yates did. But, the average for the 4 past years have been lower than the 37% that the county used. So I'm okay with the proposed reduction.
Okay. All right, then I'm going to move to confirm the county at 76,381,100. Do I have a second? Mr. Yates, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The county is confirmed at 76,381,100. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good break.
Thank you.
That concludes the agenda. The only other thing that I just want to tell board members, there will not be any hearings the week of July 15th and 16th. So if you want to take a vacation, that would be a good time to take a vacation. Otherwise, does anybody else have anything? Derek, do you have anything?
I was just going to provide a brief update on the overall numbers for you and just talk to the scheduling, but I guess it sounds like Rose has already explained that to you.
Okay.
It didn't make sense for us to try to fill that schedule out with 1 to 2 cases. So it does look like that week will be off. We have 182 cases pending for scheduling, and our capacity of the remaining board hearings is right at 180. So, it's expected that some of those cases will obviously drop off. So we're looking really good as far as caseload and capacity goes.
Good. I like that we're moving along. Okay. Does anybody else have anything?
No, have a good 4th.
Okay, all right. So then we will stand adjourned here at 10:14. The next meeting is Tuesday, July 8th at 9 a.m. virtually for board members and for accountants and the county. And as Greg said, enjoy your holiday, be safe, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Okay. I think that's it.